Greetings, folks. Just two quick videos. I wanted to talk a little bit about the latest edition of Uplink, and specifically Remedy's wonderful video game Control, one of the most welcome surprises of 2019. And we'll talk a little bit about the background and the setup for the video game in this video, and then some of the specific achievements of what the video game gets right in the second one. So first of all, Remedy. Why should you care about them? Remedy has been one of the most innovative and productive video game studios in the world since 2001. They're most famous for Max Payne. That's the iconic game that invented bullet time and brought that to video games. So the slow motion effect while shooting, Remedy really nailed that effect and put that into their video game. But Max Payne is a lot more than just a game mechanic. It's also a fantastic story. It's about a guy named Max Payne who is an NYPD undercover officer, and he gets caught up with some company corporate espionage and skullduggery, and basically he has to figure out a way to take down a really malevolent evil corporation that's destroying his city. So it's a story of insurrection. So this cop at the outside of the society, and his cover is blown, the police are hunting him, and he has to take down this giant corporation. So it's a great metaphor for really the anti-Wall Street protest movement of 2011 and afterwards, and sort of the anti-plutocratic, anti-kleptocratic mass movements of digital democracy. It's really telling a story of digital democracy and showing that you can fight the system and win. You can defeat the forces of evil and replace it with something better. And this was all the way back in 2001. Amazing achievement for its time. Now, since then, Remedy made a bunch of other games, and they were good. Alan Wake, above average game. Quantum Break, above average game. Always interesting, always well made, always with this interesting twist with good characters, but not at the level of Max Payne. So they weren't groundbreaking or doing new things with their genre. Until their latest video game, Control, where they actually went back to the well and they did something really smart and clever. And one of the things they did was they thought deeply about the problem of the shooter as a form and realized that the shooter was no longer sufficient in terms of storytelling. It's just not interesting as a mechanic to kind of point, click, point, click, point, click. That's a twitch mechanic, but there has to be a deeper form of storytelling. So what kind of story were they telling with Control? They were telling a science fiction story, but one that was rooted in two classic models from the past, one of which you may have heard of and the other is a little more obscure. And it's very important to understand they actually draw upon those two models to create their game world. The first model, many folks have heard of this individual, and that is H.P. Lovecraft, the great writer of cosmic science fiction horror, who wrote a bunch of great stories in the 20s and 30s that are still incredibly influential to this day. And they're creepy as heck, and they're scary to read, and they're amazing. And they work because they're science fiction. Everything happens for a reason. There's actually not occult stuff. He did write occult stories, but his best stuff are actually the science fiction stories where you play as sort of a scientist figure and you have to figure out what some ancient vanished race of gods is left behind in this chamber of horrors deep beneath the Antarctic. So it's scary and it's thrilling and it's suspense, but it's ultimately about science and science fiction. It follows a kind of a set of science fiction rules, and that's very, very effective storytelling. So Remedy borrowed from this to create their own game world in Control, which we'll get to in a second. The second major influence on Control, the team borrowed from some of the greatest of science fiction of all time from the Strugatsky brothers, who were writers of science fiction in the former Soviet Union and Russian, and their classic science fiction novel from the 70s, Roadside Picnic. You may have run into the Roadside Picnic scenario before because that was the inspiration for the Stalker video games. The idea of Roadside Picnic is very clever. Aliens come, visit the Earth, but then they disappear because they've gone somewhere else, but they leave behind their junk. It's like they had a picnic and then kind of threw a bunch of stuff like at leftovers and then left without even cleaning up the mess. Now these things, these alien objects, are incredibly powerful and have all these special capacities, and they warp time and space and do all these wacky things. And so the places where the aliens have visited, they're called zones, and they're locked down, and then the government sends in people to retrieve items, and sometimes with fatal effects, sometimes they manage to achieve it. So it's a great metaphor and a great storytelling science fiction idea. Remedy took this idea of the cosmic horror from Lovecraft and the idea of the alien landing zone from the Strugatsky brothers and just put it into the same universe. So the basic idea of Control is this. You play as a character who works for or with an entity called the Federal Bureau of Control. And their job is to collect not alien artifacts, but artifacts that are alien, called objects of power. They're scattered all across the Earth. They're these random objects that have these ability to and magic powers and warp time and space. And so your job is to kind of find the stuff before they cause mayhem and sequester them, quarantine them in a special building called the Oldest House. Now, the Oldest House is not just a location, it's actually an interdimensional gateway. So it's literally this nondescript building somewhere in New York City that looks like a brutalist skyscraper, creepy from the outside. Inside, though, it's this vast multiverse, all these portals connected. And the idea is that you get the objects of power and sequester them. And the scenario of the game is something goes wrong at the Bureau, and you have to clean up the mess that results from this.